Hi, this is Mina Masia, and I mustache you something. I know you've always wanted to be on my show, and today, instead of me interviewing someone, I'm talking to you about something that I think a lot of people would find extremely boring, and I'm going to try to make it interesting. This is a book written by Aristotle in the fourth century BC. It's called On Rhetoric. It's one of the best things I've ever read. I had it for a class during my MTS studies, and it's completely changed the way that I think about a lot of things. And today we're focusing on something very, very specific. In the comments, you'll see a link to a paper that I wrote called People Do Whatever They Want. It's a short thing that I wrote for my campaign, explaining that there's different people that think about things differently. And the way that Aristotle frames it is that everybody has a desired telos, telos, telos. This is a very important term when we talk about decision making, and it's in his section on deliberative rhetoric. So he splits up rhetoric into three categories. One is epideictic, which is in the present, and it's praising or blaming. One is forensic rhetoric, which is in the past to figure out what happened, who did what, and can we convince people that we figured out the right thing that actually happened to make a decision about what justice should be imposed. And today we're talking about deliberative rhetoric, which is about the future. And he says that any form of government is based on one of four different types of telos or desired end. So that Greek word telos just means desired end. And if you know what somebody's desired end is, you know how they're going to make decisions and you know how they're probably going to lean in one direction or another. So the four that he identified are people that value freedom and the type of government that they like and the type of decision making that they like is democracy. So democracy, freedom, that makes sense. People that like control and stability, like a monarchy where there's like a central authority. People that like logic and rational decision making, like an aristocracy, which doesn't have that same sort of negative connotation that you talk about with an aristocracy, kind of like in the 17 and 1800s. It's really just talking about people that like to use logic and like to use rational decision making to make decisions. I think I firmly fall into that category, and I like things to make sense when we're deciding something. And then finally, an oligarchy, which is, people that have money make decisions, which is kind of grimy. So when you decide for yourself what your primary telos is, it'll tell you what type of government you like. And this is where I must ask you something, is where do you fall and where do you lie? And you'll find that the higher you go up in an organization and the more senior you become in something, the more likely you're going to favor central decision making, like a monarchy, and that telos of control and that telos of stability is something that you're going to find more interesting. And the more of a ground level worker you are, the more you're going to favor democracy, like freedom, like, oh, we should be allowed to do whatever we want. And any good organization, and regardless of whether this is a church community or a town like the town of Sharon or a country, it's going to have a balance of these things. And this is actually how the United States was built on these principles from Aristotle, where he taught us about the one, the few, and the many. And this is something I'm starting to study even more on my own. And, there's no limit to what we can learn from Aristotle and the people that have reflected on Aristotle over the last 2,400 years. And I think that when we're talking about town government or any kind of organizational level of decision making, understanding that sometimes we're in a crisis or we're in a high stakes situation, and having one person that's the go-to person, this person makes the decision, that is the one. And then an aristocracy lends itself to the few people that, okay, like let's study this. For example, in the town of Sharon right now, we have this issue with the lake and trying to figure out what should we be doing with the lake? Should we be treating it this way or that way? Having a scientific study and an evidence-based study to understand exactly what it is that we're going to do and why we're going to do it and why that makes sense for the ecosystem of the lake and the people that are using it makes sense. And that's an aristocratic type of or logic-based or rational-based approach. And then finally, there are things that are related to everybody, and everybody should have a voice, and everybody should have a point of decision making. These are things that we vote in town meeting, and these are things that lend themselves to a democratic voting process. So again, I mustache you. Where do you fall? Where do you lie? Where do you decide you're going to spend your energy? And I think everybody understanding on a personal level where their telos is and where that telos fits in with the larger group that they are serving, and being part of that is exactly what Aristotle was hoping people would do so that they can be engaged in civic discourse and be engaged in the active process of creating their own self-government, which we're lucky to have here in the United States, and especially lucky to have in such a effective way in the town of Sharon. So thank you for listening to this evidence-based and logic-based and philosophy-based primer on Aristotle and decision making. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time for I Must Ask You Something.